What is up, fellow sickos? I'm Dan Valley coming at you with another 2025-2026 NBA season look ahead. We are on to the Dallas Mavericks, which means it's time to speak with Kirk Henderson of Pod Maverick and of Mavs Moneyball. You can find the link to all the places you can subscribe to Pod Maverick in the YouTube and podcast description. Follow Kirk on the social machine at Kirk Serious Face, spelled exactly as it sounds, and it's also on screen if you're watching for your convenience. Kirk! How the heck are you doing?
Good. I'm. It's been a long off season, and I think I'm actually ready for the basketball to begin.
For me, this offseason feels like a blur for some reason. We didn't have any. I know there's Eurobasket, but like the Olympics last year made it feel like it was longer for some reason, even though it shouldn't have. But just bizarre stuff. Speaking of bizarre stuff, though, I promise I'm not asking you to relitigate the Luka Doncic trade. What do you make of this team after going from that, trading him because what they say to increase their championship equity, to winding up with this potentially generational 19-year-old, and yet you're still trying to win? Just what do you make of their entire direction right now?
It's difficult because during my time as a Mavericks fan, they've always had, and I mean, even during some of the weirder mid 20 teens when they were kind of like a 7th, 8th seed, they've always had pretty good ball handlers. Like there was a year when even Raymond Felton was like the team point guard, and he's a passable point guard. And we're going to talk about this more as we go on, but like this team is built in such a way that they don't value ball handling. Mm-hmm. And it's a truly kind of unique experiment. And I think that like my big picture takeaway from this team is that they're going to be unlike anybody else in the NBA, which in and of itself can be interesting. I'm not sure it's interesting for 82 games. And because of the injury to Kyrie Irving, it really puts a hard ceiling on what this team could possibly be. The flip side of that is the talent is as such to whereas I actually think there's a pretty high floor.
A lot of dudes.
A lot of guys. Like if you don't know anything about basketball, but you do follow socials, like there's just names you know. And that's of value because it usually means the players are pretty good. So it's sort of tough to make what they're trying to build. I mean, Nico Harrison, I think this is the thing he's going to be known for the rest of his life. And he's ultimately wrong. I think he does make a pretty decent point in terms of, I think he's very concerned about building a team around a supermax player. Not constructed a certain way, like the Oklahoma City Thunder will likely be a kind of exception versus a rule because you have to nail every point. And if the hard cap is going to exist, if the second apron is going to exist, you just can't. Committing $80 million to a guy is a daunting thing. And I actually do get that as much as I don't agree with the Luka Doncic trade.
Yeah, that's a whole different discussion, but I think the bar for those contracts, we're already kind of seeing it increase. Luka Doncic, That trade was an anomaly, but that's Trae Young's extension is just a good harbinger. What he gets, not eligible for the Supermax, but he gets less than the max. I think that will show. We're kind of just waiting for that first big name to like not get the money you would think that they get, because that would hint at a different type of team building. But what I wanted to ask you before diving into this team specifically this season, I think what could be construed as fascinating and also kind of cool is that, well, you're trying to win now, you have talent to help you win now, and this 19-year-old generational prospect, but you're also really expensive, don't have a ton of assets. Is there a risk in kind of going for it before Cooper Flagg is in his prime?
I think
by the time go ahead. Sorry.
It's the same thing they did with Luka, and only they did it even earlier. I mean, midway through the Luka trade or Luka's rookie years when they traded for Porzingis, which, I think history doesn't look back on that trade very well. But the first year and a half of it after Porzingis came back from ACL is actually really good. The Mavericks were really good in that 2020 bubble season, 2019-2020 season that ended in the bubble. The challenge that they're sort of staring down is if you say we have a 4-year window, then that and they've not adjusted that at all, which drives me crazy as a fan because it just puts a limiting factor on things. Then it's sort of reasonable to assume that they're going to do whatever they can to maximize that window. Well, if you do that, then by the time, Cooper Flagg's rookie contract is up, you're staring at a 20, I guess basically the 29-30 season is what it would be. Something like it. Maybe my math's wrong. Doesn't really matter. And at that point, you'd be staring at a team that might not have very many draft assets and might not have many young players. And that's just sort of a bleak place to be, because building teams in the NBA, you can turn things around with one pick, but that one pick also has to fall into an infrastructure that's pretty good. And so I'm a little worried about that. I also think that if this, you mentioned something earlier, which I don't think a lot of people understand. The Mavericks are $1 million underneath the second apron. $1 million. Next year, they're 19 million over it before anything even happens. So it's like they have to do stuff. Just because they have a very expensive team with, again, pretty good players. But the question is, do those players fit? And so I strongly advocated from the moment Kyrie Irving went down that they needed to trade Anthony Davis, because Anthony Davis is not a 1A option. He's a top 15, top 20 player in the NBA, whatever you want to call him. But there's concerns there. And if this team starts out and the schedule is such to where they're actually going to start out like 13-7, and everybody's going to think they're great. And then what's going to happen is like the regular season is going to kick in, and then following Christmas, they're going to get bushwhacked. And then it's going to be what happened to the Mavericks? Oh no. Well, what happened to the Mavericks is the season is 82 games long. That's what's going to happen to the Mavericks. So it's an odd place to be, because Flagg is so enticing. And I think putting a ceiling on him is insane, because a younger player's developmental years, like their best developmental years, I think are like from roughly like 16 to 23. And he's not turning 19 for 3 more months. So it's nuts. Yeah.
What have you made of, well, I guess let's start with the comments from Jason Kidd that they want to put the ball in his hands a bunch. And it's obviously easier to do that without Kyrie there to start. Do you view him as someone, from what you based off what you see when he was in college, what you saw in Summer League, do you think that that's something that he can do, or does the roster around him need to change a little bit before you have confidence that he could develop that type of offensive game?
So I think he can do it, but I also think the Mavericks are going to play 3 yards in a cloud of dust basketball. They don't have shooting. It is bleak. You have Klay Thompson, a generational shooter. You have D'Angelo Russell, a good shooter, but probably a good shooter in a secondary role, and he's going to be asked to be the primary ball handler. So Flagg is going to be driving a lot into traffic. I'm excited for it. I actually think that's the most interesting thing Jason Kidd has said, because while I'm very frustrated with people who were sick of Luka ball only for the concept to become, let's give the ball to Cooper Flagg, like why not just stick with Luka ball? It's a little obtuse of me, but it's also just
new is always better, Kirk.
Isn't that the truth? But Flagg is really shockingly adaptable. I was watching some videos early in the process of him. It was Jay Kyleman of The Ringer pointed this out to me, that when he was like 15, his shot mechanics were busted. And then he goes to Duke and sort of has like 50% from the field, 40% from 3. And that happened in 3 years of working with high school stuff with no dedicated, you're working around. I mean, I know these high school kids at that level are basically professionals, but it's a different situation. So it's, what can he do when this is his only and sole focus? And that's really exciting to consider. I just think that if that's what you're relying on to be the Mavericks engine, that comes with a ceiling, and it's not a championship caliber team, as Nico Harrison has repeated over and over again.
I came away when people were, it seems like we did this, well, we, not you and I, but people did this with Wemby after he had that bad game in Summer League. When I came away from Cooper Flagg's bad game in Summer League actually thinking like, oh, there's more offensive tools, like dead stop offensive tools here than I thought there was going to be. My main concern, you've already mentioned it with the spacing though, is will they make it? I'm not even trolling the Anthony Davis doesn't want to play 5 thing, but Cooper Flagg's going to be a lot of de facto 3, or is he going to slide up to the 2? Will they make it a priority to at least get to lineups where it's Cooper Flagg plus 1 big?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's why I sort of started off talking about that there's just not going to be anybody else playing basketball like them. We're coming from this era where we've had 1 big basketball a lot of the time to where we're going to have 1 guard basketball with the Mavericks. It's going to be
the Rockets were ahead of the curve. They saw it coming.
It's going to be very, very funky. And his vision is vastly underrated. A stat I keep going back to, even though it's probably meaningless. In Summer League, he played 60 minutes. He had 3 turnovers.
Which in Summer League is like Hall of Fame shit.
Yeah, but and the Spurs threw a guy, I can't remember the guy's name. They drafted him in the first
Carter
round.
Bryant.
Wow, what a good defender. And he had a couple of turnovers against Carter Bryant and then just didn't have any the rest of the time. And that, if you have the ball a lot, that's impressive to me. Not really answering your question here, but it's I just have a hard time putting a ceiling on him because of just how quickly younger players can figure things out. But I wonder what that means to the rest of the guys, because if I'm guarding the Mavericks, I'm just camping 4 guys in the paint and saying, beat us from 3. We'll talk to you later. And that that's just, I think that's what's going to happen.
At the other end of the floor on defense, it does seem like they're set up more right now based off what it feels like their lineup construction is going to be, that he's going to defend on the ball a lot. And I think that he can do that. And you can also correct me if I'm wrong, that they're not going to have him do that. But if he's playing next to 2 bigs a lot, or if he's kind of a de facto wing for them, a lot of what he does best is like the defensive disruption stuff away from the ball, or what you would think is like in that 4-man type role. Does that concern you at all? Or again, are we just, they will get to lineups that allow him to do that?
I think that's what Nico is sort of happy about, because if you put, let's just think lineup talk real quick here. You have D'Angelo Russell at the point, a variation, like there's 6 guys I'm going to mention here for a 5-guy lineup. I think Klay Thompson will be talked about, but I think Klay might be the one that has to come off the bench. PJ Washington, Cooper Flagg, Anthony Davis, Dereck Lively, or Daniel Gafford. I really think they're going to play 4 big guys. They've talked about it too much to be this full of it. And they're just going to say, let's see what happens. That's why I mentioned leading off the show with they don't seem to value ball handling, or they think they can, it's like in football, they talk about like manufacturing touches for guys. I think they believe, the Mavericks believe, they're going to manufacture ball handling. Are they going to play it like the Detroit Pistons 2003 era pace? Like, what is going to happen? Like, I'm really, really intrigued. And I'm also a little bit worried because I'm just not good about talking about this kind of basketball. But that's just sort of where I see things going. It's very unique in modern basketball.
All the stuff that's out there with Kyrie Irving, what do you think is like a realistic time? There was the whole, is he going to come back early thing? Like, if you're following the Mavs, does it like behoove them to just bring him along slowly at this point and kind of let this season play out where it is, or do you expect him to be back by a certain point?
Well, Kyrie's never come back from anything early, and he's had a lot of injuries. One of the things you see about him in the offseason that's very interesting and fun about him to cover, frustrating if you're a basketball diehard, but if you're just interested in him as a human, he likes a lot of things other than basketball. And I think he loves basketball, but I think when he's away from basketball, it's out of his mind. That's not to say he's not rehabbing hard or anything like that, but an ACL tear at 32 is not something I think you can rush. Nico has been putting out into the universe that he thinks Kyrie's ahead of schedule. Well, Kyrie didn't get the surgery till late March, and 8 months after late March is essentially December. That's the earliest timetable of anybody like we've ever seen. Like your Adrian Petersons, like your super athletes in their prime. Kyrie's 32. He's small. I think All-Star break is a fair guess if you think he's coming back this year. But even he said don't count on it. Like, he has said this. So I want to take him at his word. And my expectations are centered around, I would really rather be delighted and surprised by Kyrie's return than desperately seeking it out and hoping that he's the bump. Because even when he does come back, he's not going to be the Kyrie we know, because getting used to trusting the leg in NBA level situations, that's going to take the rest of the year. It just is. I don't expect him to, I really do expect him to come back healthy, but not really until the 2026-27 season.
There's also the element of having not played within this roster construction before. He's really good he could play off of anybody, but like not being able to go through a training camp with whatever this ecosystem plans to be without him is a big deal.
Yep.
What did you think of the contract that they ended up, and also just their offseason at large, extending Gafford, PJ Washington, using D'Angelo Russell as that ball handling stopgap? How do you feel about the way they navigated the offseason?
I mean, they're in a difficult position. They built a team for Luka and then traded Luka. And that's kind of the start and the finish. Had they even kept Luka, they'd be still staring at this sort of offseason where when you're loaded for bear, when you believe you have a good team, you have to keep spending because you can't let guys go for nothing, or you have to re-sign them and trade them and get something back. That's really what the Gafford deal felt like to me, was kicking the can down the road with what to do with him. I don't know the final terms of his deal, but it made it sound like he signed for X, but then when they weren't able to get a trade together for him, then that money might have increased just so they could, make him whole, so to speak. You don't want to go into a season like this with both him and PJ Washington potentially hitting the open market, because if they're not getting their minutes, they become malcontents, and who could blame them? So I think given the situation that they had, they navigated it as well as possible, but they put themselves in a very difficult spot just with an expensive team. If they don't perform, this is not going to hold, but as of things right now, they roughly owe a repeater tax penalty in the $30 million range for this year. And then next year, the 2026-27 season, looking at it right now, that shoots up to $90 million. The Adelson family is one of the richest families on earth, but I also don't think they bought this asset to continually sink money into it. And at least at this rate, if you're not getting something in return. So the Mavericks are going to have to be pretty successful. So I'm thinking like second round or higher in order to really justify some of what they've thrown together for this team. So it puts everybody in a difficult spot, and this is where the hard cap and being an NBA accountant comes into play, where it just sort of stinks that we have to have these discussions, because if you're drafting good teams and you want to keep them together, you shouldn't be punitively, ripped for trying to build an organic team. Now, the Mavericks have at least traded guys in, but compared to where the roster was when they made the Western Conference Finals in 2022, it's a much, much, much better roster than that team ever was. I mean, it's just wild to look back and think about where they've been versus where they are.
And you mentioned Daniel Gafford. I keep going back to the big men of it all, and you even mentioned before that you think they're going to try playing four bigs. But I look at him specifically as you have Dereck Lively. There just will be minutes where Anthony Davis is the five. Like, it will happen.
Yep.
Is there a chance that like Gafford kind of falls by the wayside, or if they're looking to cut that tax bill, is that someone that they wind up shopping aggressively this year? Like, I'm just curious to see how big his role is within the context of the and look, injuries could take care of a lot of it. We're talking about Lively and AD, who are guys that seem like they're always dealing with something. But if this team is healthy, even if they want to play dual bigs, just because you have Najee Marshall and PJ Washington, I find myself thinking a lot about what Daniel Gafford's value and role to this team is going to be.
That's right, because defensively, Daniel Gafford is a really good shot blocker, but anything outside of 5 feet, he is not good. And that's where the hope of, like you mentioned, Cooper Flagg and his sort of off-ball potentiality on defense. That's where like Flagg and Washington clean up a lot for Gafford. It's almost like a reverse of having way back in the day Tyson Chandler protecting everything at the rim. You somehow have like these secondary kind of wing players as your final defense. Like that's what's helping Gafford, because Gafford is actually kind of a spectacular offensive player. I think very underrated. He dunks the ball a lot. He has nice passing touch and that sort of thing, but he does strike me as the odd man out. But that's where the injury element comes into play. Dereck Lively has played less than 100 NBA games regular season through 2 years because of injuries and then like personal issues that he's had. And like that, you just, as much as I like Lively, he's got to show it. You've got to stay healthy. You got to play 65 games or more in order to really be impactful on a team. And so I think this is a little bit of a hedge there. I don't necessarily think the team would ever move Lively, but Lively's like value was sky high after the finals. And now he strikes me as a guy who is one of many talented bigs, but he needs to be healthy in order to show some growth, because last year was basically a wasted year for him.
Yeah, and I'm curious. What I'm curious is about that is I view him as, just looking back to his rookie year, I feel like that's someone who can be a transformative defender. Offensively, like, you can see the outlines of what would be a more versatile. I don't need to hear about Dereck Lively shooting threes. I don't care. But as someone who could be like a more, like, there's real usage there on the offensive end. But I'm curious is, like, what does he look like? You mentioned this team just diminished ball handling. And I think as much as AD is limited, just given the importance or the swing factor that Dereck Lively is, like, the lack of ball handling on this team feels like it could hurt him more than anybody else. And so I'm curious, like, what are you kind of watching for with him in year 3 on offense? Like, what needs to happen for him to not just survive the way the Mavs are set up, but, like, kind of be optimized within it?
Tim Cato on the DLLS podcast earlier in the summer made the joke that it's going to be the most dribble handoff offense in the NBA. Like, just repeated dribble handoffs over and over. And I'm going to be fascinated to see what they do with Lively, because we saw it in the second half of Lively's rookie year. It sort of diminished in the playoffs because obviously your stakes change. But Lively is a really good basketball player. He is not a single skilled guy. Part of why he shot up the draft boards in the weeks and months before the 23 NBA draft was because he showed a lot of offensive potential in workouts and stuff that he never really got a chance to show at Duke. He's only shot 2 threes ever in the NBA.
But how many in workout videos?
I know, right? I still don't think he's actually going to shoot many, but they're going to have to let something happen. I mean, he's a really good decision maker. I really loved him out of the short roll a lot of the times when he was playing with Luka. But now you're just not doing stuff like that. Are you doing big to big stuff? Are you doing things with Anthony Davis and Cooper Flagg? You know, Flagg really, how do you say the guy who went to the Suns name? Malawak? Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Kaman Malawak, yeah.
Him and Flagg had some very nice big to big chemistry at Duke. And I'm curious if that kind of and it just strikes me as kind of a given, because Flagg's a smart player. Lively's a smart player who's played with Luka. There's got to be some optionality there where you're getting Lively going at the basket. You know, we're not talking about dribbling as a 7'1" guy, maybe a little, maybe the occasional thing, but putting him in actions where you can see what he has. You just have to find out. And if he gives you, and if it's something that you're not expecting, like it's not like he's necessarily gonna have a post game. This isn't 1992, but if he gives you anything offensively beyond offensive rebounds, putback dunks, and rolls, you're excited. I think he's the kind of guy, if given the opportunity, could average, 2.5 assists a game, which, okay, you're thinking, that's the. But he's a big guy. He's a center. That would be. They're going to need things to come from unorthodox places this season.
I love the short roll stuff with him. It leads me to a point where D'Angelo Russell and Klay Thompson feel way too important to this team then, because if you want to run something with Cooper Flagg and Dereck Lively, you have to have 8, and assuming AD's on the court, he's not spacing. Or if he is, defenses don't care. So if he's in the dunker spot, you need Klay and D'Angelo, or even if you flip those roles between Lively and AD, it just leads me, because I'm looking at the rest of this roster and it's like, okay, where are the other shooters aside from them, unless you think it's Jaden Hardy time or something like that. So that's just what makes me uncomfortable about this roster, but I still really, they could do some weird stuff, like you said. I wonder if they're going to have the spacing in the half court to do, to really explore what Lively can do, I guess.
Yeah.
And the other thing you mentioned that I find fascinating is them playing at this Detroit Pistons-esque pace from 2003. Not saying you were inferring that was the plan, but shouldn't this team be built to really hammer it in transition, and in addition to crashing the offensive glass, which post Luka trade didn't really do a ton of either of those things. But you look at the personnel that's available, AD's injured, so just will that be more? At least the transition stuff, is that going to be more of an identity when this team, when you look Brandon Williams is here, Cooper Flagg is here, AD can still run the floor, Lively can run the floor.
See, that's where I'm very interested, because Flagg can obviously dribble the ball fine. AD, I think is doesn't either doesn't want it or hasn't gotten the opportunity to kind of handle the ball in transition as much as other guys. But you'd like to see it. I think it ups their turnovers quite a bit. But I also think scoring on these Mavericks is going to be such a bear that you got to find a way to get easier points. Playing the half-court game with the Mavericks on offense is going to be ugly at times. So I wouldn't mind a little more reckless basketball now and again if they can build and develop. I mean, Flagg in transition is a monster. And I mean without the ball. Like he runs so hard and is so good at kind of being like an NFL tight end where he gets open in space and can go do things with the ball after he gets it. That would be something I'd like to see. But I bet they grind things to a halt.
Man, that's kind of a bummer when you have Cooper Flagg to me, but I also understand it. Well, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I agree. And that's where the Kyrie injury comes into play, where it's like if you had D'Angelo Russell as your secondary ball handler versus your primary, you could see some fun things. You're just like, okay, here are these two guards, mixing and matching and bringing the ball up the court, and then just a fleet of condors along the back line on defense. Oh, you can talk yourself into that, but without it just gets funky.
What is this team's ceiling on defense? I keep going back to, you mentioned like scoring at the basket on them. Team shot like 56% at the rim when AD played the 4 last year with them. Small sample size.
Pretty bad,
but
though.
Just sort of like they were taking a lot of shots at the rim during that time. They're still
AD was AD was really bad. AD was unhealthy. They shouldn't have traded for him, and they should have gotten additional compensation for the fact that they traded for an unhealthy player. That's just the way this should have gone. He was never right, and that's where the AD question always becomes so challenging to talk about, because when is AD right? There's not really a good answer for that one. However, if you're looking at the team in theory, if he's able to give you 55 to 65 games, I mean, he misses 20 games a year, so I'm just sort of banking that in. If he can give you high quality play during most of those games, I think their defense is going to be better. I mean, he really didn't try on defense last year after that Rockets game. Like, there was AD in space was abysmal, which is the thing that has actually been, so that's what has sort of differentiated him from other bigs, is because he could guard anywhere, and he didn't last year. He's going to have additional help this year, but he's going to need to look like the defensive player that he has been during points in his career.
Max Christie sent you guys for a little bit of a roller coaster ride when he came over in that trade as well. What were kind of after watching the highs, after watching the lows, what were just your overall impressions of him and his role with this team?
Really loved him. And I think the important part about the lows, if you want to go check out his minutes logs, he had clearly not played this much consecutive basketball in his entire life, and hit the equivalent of the rookie wall after about 15 games with the Mavericks. He started off with the Mavericks like equaling scoring streaks that like Luka and Kyrie were like the only two players to have ever done. Like, he scored like 15 points a game for like 15 straight games. It's something nuts. And then his
name, I think, came up in like one of those finds too.
And then he just died on the vine, where all of a sudden it was like, oh, this guy can't shoot, he can't defend, he can't do anything. And I didn't really understand it until my co-host on Pod Mavericks said, well, just go look at his minutes totals from this year and last year. Like, he was a kind of a workhorse. And as much as, you might prepare yourself and train and get in the gym, we watched James Harden run into this his first year with the Rockets. Sometimes you just don't have the juice, and you got to figure out ways to build up your body better. So I was really pleased with him. I have high hopes in the sense of, he's going to be an excellent role player for his entire career kind of guy. He's got a pretty high ceiling right now. I'm sorry, a pretty high floor, which is what you want from a role player. His shooting looked nice. I think he was way too hot from the mid-range. Like, that's not something that's sustainable. He was like Dirk, Steph Curry, Joel Embiid in the mid-range for his time with Dallas, at least during the first 15 games. But for a guy that I think he's on a really affordable contract. He's an exciting player to have, and he's the kind of guy who can become a fan favorite just with like his effort, that sort of thing.
Is there anything like specifically aside from he's pigeonholed into this 3-and-D type box? Is there anything else on offense? Though you mentioned the mid-range game, how important is that to the Mavericks? It is the drives went up a lot too when he came over from LA. Is there just something you're monitoring with his offensive development, or do you think maybe there's not too much more to plumb based off what you've seen?
I'm not sure. His ball handling needed a lot of work, like a lot of work. But that's you get to the NBA and that's not uncommon. They have Phil Handy now with the Mavericks, who is kind of one of Kyrie's favorite guys. And, they did lose Shamgod to the Magic, which is one of the best ball handling coaches in the league. But I think with some dedication and that sort of thing, like his offensive game improved a lot, the shooting, things like that. So if he can unlock any more ball handling and become, more of a playmaker at all, that could help unlock some stuff. The mid-range game, it's like you hate to knock it because when shots are going down, it's great. But it's just we know now with what we know about like those longer twos, they're just an inefficient shot no matter who's doing it, unless you're like one of the best 5 guys ever. So I'm not, we'll see where we go with him. He's sort of penciled in for me right now as like the 9th guy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But that's just the way
dudes on this team. Said it.
Yeah.
A lot of dudes.
Right, but and he's going to get his time. I think maybe he strikes me as a guy who Jason Kidd would like a great deal. So we'll see where it goes this season.
Can I just get your quick thoughts on some of like the younger or more improving guys on this roster and any expectations you might have for them moving forward?
Which guys are we talking about that are considered
I want to
younger?
start. I have very little feel for him. Mike Shear of Basketball Poetry came on. We talked about him a bunch with Hidden Gems. He really likes Brandon Williams. What are your thoughts on Brandon Williams?
So he's just kind of two things. The good thing is that he's a water bug type player and they don't have anybody else like this. I mean, he is fast and he can score and he is a very also willing passer. The flip side is he's small and he has part of why nobody knows who he is because he's just injured a lot. He had a pretty healthy season with the Mavericks, which is something, but I just wonder how much they can rely on a guy who was like their two-way guy. Like if that's a person who you're relying on, that says much more about the roster construction than it does him. I really do enjoy watching him play because I think he brings that true point guard element that they just need minutes from. But I just sort of, I don't know where they're getting those minutes. If they're going to give them to Brandon Williams, those minutes are going to come at the expense of a better player who plays a different position. Just that the log, we just keep circling back to the log jam at forward. The Mavericks just have a lot of forwards. Are you not going to play Klay Thompson because you need Brandon Williams running the point? I mean, the answer might be yes. And that has sort of different questions and concerns that come up as a result of that.
My thought with him, and especially if like he's hitting his threes, Brandon Williams, is does D'Angelo Russell somehow freelance or play his way into Jason Kidd's doghouse? And is that where maybe some of the minutes can be made up? Maybe even post Kyrie coming back.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. I think part of why they sought out D'Angelo Russell is I think he actually works quite well with AD. Even though it seemed like that Lakers team was ready to move on from him, I do think he actually plays basketball well with AD, knows AD's strengths. AD sort of succeeds the most when he has a penetrating guard that he can work with. And I think Russell fits that bill and Williams fits that bill too. So, if you're looking for upside, the names don't have the pedigree that the Mavericks have had in the past. Obviously you're coming off having Luka for 7 years. It's just sort of a different deal. But I mean, there's something there. I just wonder if that's a break glass in case of emergency option for Jason Kidd versus something that they're trying to incorporate earlier in the year.
Do you have any early impressions of one Ryan Nembhard?
Way too small. I saw him at Summer League. He is
grow. That's your advice to him? Grow.
5'9". He's listed at 6 foot, and I was just. He's really, really good. The NBA is the land of giants. It's one of those things that people who don't go to games regularly. So you go to a football game, like Luka Doncic is 3 inches taller than Micah Parsons. Right? These men are enormous that play in the NBA, and it's when you're that small, you might be able to run the offense okay, but on defense, unless you're Fred VanVleet and really Jalen Brunson levels of strong, you're getting targeted. And teams just, because nowadays they just find your mismatch and attack. I don't care how many big guys you have behind. Maybe I'm wrong. I would like to be wrong. I enjoyed watching him play in Summer League. It just is one of those things that stands out for me.
Given this team's need for ball handling and shooting, is there a chance that this is the Jaden Hardy year?
Jaden Hardy is the most confident basketball player I have seen since Eddie House. He was so annoyingly effective during the Mavericks road to the finals. Like, he had some big moments in those playoffs. And then last year, he couldn't do anything. He couldn't get out of his own way. He is a very much a A-B decision tree kind of guy where he either needs to catch the ball on the move or catch the ball and shoot it. Asking him to do something where he dribbles, it becomes a, oh no, he's dribbling situation. Okay. And I just don't think he fits. I mean, his agent got him in on a good deal because I think had he not signed that deal, I don't think he'd be in the NBA right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's it, because he's only, what is he on? He's making like, what, $4 million? Is that?
I think he's on like year million, 2 right? Of like it's a good deal. It's like the kind of deal you can include in a trade package, but also doesn't like hurt. You know, you're not like digging into a team's cap and being like, oh no, why'd we sign that guy?
Are you ready to enter the annual cookie cutter / the lightning round portion of the podcast?
Absolutely.
So we've gone over it, but I have to ask, it's the cookie cutter question. Looking at the roster right now, what is this team's single biggest need? And if you have the second biggest need beyond that, feel free to throw it in since we talked about the first one so much.
I still think dribbling overtakes shooting as a need. Maybe because I think you can manufacture some good shooting if you have the dribble penetration to like drive and kick. Because NBA players are good at shooting balls, so we all know
you have Clay and PJ, and for sure.
Yeah, and PJ is even okay. You know, it's like Anthony Davis is like the one where I'm like, that guy actually can't shoot. Doesn't really matter. But the rest of them, I'm interested in. So I would say dribbling.
Is there anything about this team, could be a strength, another concern, a storyline that's flying under the radar that you think deserves more of a spotlight as we head into the season?
Honestly, the coaching staff.
Okay.
The coaching staff is good. They have Frank Vogel on the bench, Jay Triano. They just have sort of a deep roster of guys that are experienced problem solvers in a basketball sense. They have, I read the full list of coaches, like they have 11 coaches for a 15-person roster. And obviously that's not abnormal, but that would be my initial takeaway, where as much as Kidd drives me crazy at times, I think he's surrounded himself with some good people to be able to help to manage the season.
What about the overhaul of just the health training staff, whatever you want to.
Well, when you go from Dr. Nick or whoever they had back there in the training staff, it's got to be getting better. You can't misdiagnose a broken ankle. Like everything will have to improve in that regard.
I think mine for this team is something that I don't get things talked about enough. And part of this is Nico's fault. He's just been boxed into this. This is what he wants. This is what he's doing. I'm curious, is like Cooper Flagg changes things to some extent. What is his willingness to adapt as the season goes on? If this season goes poorly, is he going to move off contracts and maybe put them at, you mentioned trading Anthony Davis. I'm not saying that should necessarily be the end game, but like, is he willing to be reactive at least to that degree if something goes wrong, or if something goes right, or if it's clear, oh, this team is, Kyrie's back and we're the 3 seed in the West, but we need something to get us a little over the hump. Like, how aggressive is he in going about that? I'm curious what his flexibility is on his current vision for this roster and this window.
It's a great question, but if I'm to give him credit in one regard, it's that he is unafraid of huge swings. When you look at his portfolio of moves with the Mavericks, every single one has been a pretty big swing. Bringing in Christian Wood and sending out 4 contracts and a first-round pick. That's a big move, because it also included one of Luka's best friends back then, Boban Marjanovic. The Kyrie trade, enormous. Like, we look back on it now and we're like, oh, it's Kyrie Irving. I mean, Kyrie Irving is coming off a 3-year stretch where everybody thought he was insane and unable to play basketball. And they got him at what ended up being an okay rate. The Luka Doncic trade itself, the Porzingis trade for back then, is just a big. So there's a number of his moves where you got to say, all right, this guy's at least willing to take the swing. because the Mavericks are projected to be over the second apron next year, I think that just has to exist as sort of a hanging chad with what the Mavericks do, because you always have to be looking ahead. You cannot box yourself in, and the Mavericks are very close to being boxed in with where their salary is right now.
Right, and the thing with the second apron too, as people have pointed out, is like dipping your toes in there for 1 or 2 years at a time is fine, but you need to pick and choose when that 1 or 2 year window is coming, because you don't want to be, start the clock on, we need to stay out of it for X years in a row, otherwise our pick gets moved to the end of the first round. And if you're the Mavs next year, let's say, if they're good enough, okay, I guess you could stay in the second apron, but like, what is good enough in that regard? Like, is this team just going to roll into 50-something wins and look like a title contender out of the gate? That's a tough sell, just unless Cooper Flagg is like an all-NBA player in year one, basically.
Right. And I think they're going to be good enough to be interesting, but still sort of in like that play-in mix.
You're building a 10-man rotation without Kyrie Irving. Who are the 10 members of that rotation?
So we mentioned 6 earlier: D'Angelo Russell, Cooper Flagg, Klay Thompson, Anthony Davis, Dereck Lively, Dan Gafford. That was sort of PJ Washington. Sorry, that was sort of my mix. The other guys that you got here have to be Najee Marshall, Max Christie. On the run there, you have the rundown. You put down Caleb Martin, but I think it has to be Brandon Williams. I really think that he's just going to work himself up there to be the third guard to where they need it, because Caleb Williams, by the end of last year, it was like, what does this guy do at an NBA level? It was pretty uncomfortable.
And then when Kyrie comes back, it's probably Brandon Williams that gets the bump in that situation.
Yes, if he comes back this year, yes. But even still, you got to be flexible enough to where if Kyrie comes back with 30 games left, you only probably expect him to play like 20.
If he does come back this year, what is your appetite or expectation for how much him and D'Angelo Russell will play together? Or is that something they're going to look to heavily stagger?
I think they would. My instincts would say they would stagger it, except for must-win situations, just to get the most out of it, and really to sort of keep. Kid is a guy that strikes me as he doesn't want to show his cards that much. It's why he kills me during the middle of the year, where it's like January, February. They just run dog water offenses where nothing's interesting. And it's like, well, this is when you got to be stacking wins if you want to be a playoff team. So I expect them to sort of stagger if that would be the case.
I didn't include this on your rundown, but because we've talked about it so much, without Kyrie, what is your best offensive lineup for this team?
Offensive lineup. Okay, that would vary. That would be pretty simple, where I think you would have to go D'Angelo Russell, Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, Cooper Flagg, Dereck Lively. I think Flagg at the 3 is the workable one there.
Wait, so that had D'Lo, Flagg, Lively.
Did I not say Klay? God, am I this bad at this? Let's try this again.
I thought you said Klay and PJ and no AD. I thought is the guy.
Yeah, that's a tough one. See, I think AD at the 5 is highly overrated because he can't shoot. That's just me. I just hate watching Anthony Davis play offense. It's really painful. I'm probably the worst person to ask that question to, but I want to see Flagg in like a 4, like a 3 to 4 role. At that's where my focus would be.
So this is to some extent matchup dependent, but if the season ends, what would you expect to be their go-to crunch time lineup by then?
Crunch time. All right. That's where Anthony Davis probably would play the 5. So you got Anthony Davis, Cooper, and PJ is kind of flanking Anthony Davis. And then some mix of maybe like a Max Christie and a D'Angelo Russell.
Okay. Is there a weirdo lineup you want to see Jason Kidd try?
I mean, the weirdo lineup's like the basic lineup we keep describing, where it's like he's Cooper Flagg at the 2. Like I understand it, but it feels so 2K, where it's like, we're gonna move this completely. I can't possibly imagine it where it's gonna be so bizarre. I don't want to see it, but that's the one where it's just like, this is for the weirdos, and unfortunately, and it just. I got to tell you, a lot of people in Mavs land just don't really believe that this is what Kidd's going to do. He's really going to play Cooper Flagg in a 2-guard position?
Well, so here's my thing and what would be my pick. is that at that point just throw Cooper Flagg at the 1 and then have Flagg, PJ, Najee,
Yeah.
AD, and then I guess Lively is the best big for that.
See,
So let's just see.
I keep leaving Najee out, and I shouldn't. Najee is a incredible connecting piece within an offense. Mm-hmm. He can't shoot to save his life, but he does everything else really well.
Yeah, and when he's downhill, man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He's a very underrated guy. They have him on a great contract. So that's where this is just so tough for me, because I think if you're doing what's best for the team, that's what you do. And for Flagg's if you're doing what's best for Flagg's development, you put the ball in his hands and you say, come what may. Because if it's the difference between the Mavericks winning 37 games or 42 games, who cares? You want, like, if that's the difference between you being the 10th seed or the 11th seed, you eat that, because you're not going anywhere anyways.
Before I have you make some predictions, is there anything or anyone else about this team that we didn't discuss that you believe warrants conversation?
No, but I'm glad you reminded me about Najee, because he's just so underappreciated within wider NBA circles. Just a really talented, interesting, weird player.
So you and Josh Bo, your co-host on Pod Maverick, did this exercise on an episode I listened to recently that I loved, and so I want to ask you about it. What is the floor and ceiling for you for this team in terms of wins? If you're putting a ceiling on the number of wins you could see them getting, and factoring in the totality of everything, injuries, trades, whatever.
I really think it's like such a hilariously small margin difference. Matt Moore, HP Basketball, said to me once where he's like, there's just 5 games every season for every team that you have to throw out the window, in the sense that they could have won it, they could have lost it. It was a complete toss-up. They might win those 5 games next year. They might lose those 5 games next year. And I think about that a lot, because I think the 5-game margin for this Mavericks team is sort of their floor and their ceiling. Now, where you think that hits is almost entirely up to how, if you think that Anthony Davis is a superstar. And you know, he started out, like, I don't know if you remember his start to last season. He was like 31-12 for 20 games. He was outstanding. And then Anthony Davis'd himself out the rest of the season. Like, those 20 games carried his numbers. I think their floor is quite literally something like 39 to 40 games. Like, I think they're going to be just fine. I think they're going to win a lot, and I think they're going to have losing streaks. But then at the end of the day, they're too talented to lose that many games, even if they can't dribble. They just have too many good players to be unsubstantiatedly awful. But the flip side of that is, without Kyrie, and I'm sort of banking in a Kyrie non-season in this prediction, not playing at all, I would say 45 games is like the ceiling, just barely over 500.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a really thin margin.
Yeah. 45 and 37, or like 40 and then like 40 and 42. It's sort of like my ceiling and my floor.
If we were to operate under the assumption that you're not getting a Kyrie Irving season, I think their floor might be lower than that. And I know that, like, if you're a top tier defense and can, like, play in the muck, you'll win a lot of games in the regular season. But without Kyrie Irving, their offense is just inundated with question marks and redundancies.
I think that's true. And I'll tell you this, as I make these predictions, it serves me no good to crap on the team because none of my fans and people that listen want to hear that. Everybody wants to be told they're special. So I think I'm attempting to be optimistic in a large sense. Because if things go downhill, then they're going to start making some sweeping changes. They just have to. And that sort of throws all your prediction stuff out the window.
What's also interesting is I think their ceiling, if you get anything from Kyrie, might be a lot higher, because their size and what they can do on defense makes me, like, it just wouldn't shock me if this team won 50 games. I don't know, in terms of playoff threat level, I don't ascribe a ton to that for them, but just as a regular season team, if they're any semblance of healthy, that defense match would be really good. And so it wouldn't shock me if they were like a 49-50 win team. I wouldn't predict it. And so now I'll ask you this. Where do you ultimately see them landing in the Western Conference standings hierarchy?
I think they're just going to be in that playing group. I let me just go look. This is a good question. I should have had the final standings pulled up from last year, because I actually have some spicy takes about the teams that are around them. So the Mavericks finished last year 10th. There was a pretty clear grouping of teams roughly from, so the Lakers won 50 games and then it goes down. They were the 3 seed. The Mavericks were the 10th seed at 39. So 11 games separated those teams. Kings were 40 wins, and then there's like a jump up to the Grizzlies and the Warriors. The grouping of teams that are going to be kind of playing for this stuff, I see the Grizzlies taking a pretty major step back. I don't think that's uncontroversial. Maybe I'm wrong.
They might be one of the most confusing teams in the West.
Just confusing. Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, they have talent, and it's like, what do you get out of the players that you have? The Kings, I think, are going to be pretty weird and in a not fun way to watch. So I think maybe they drop off. Suns, obviously pretty bad. I think Portland and San Antonio take steps in the right direction, but I don't believe in the Spurs. I
wouldn't say I don't believe in them, but the amount of people that think that they're just, I know they won the minutes with Wemby last year, but we're talking about guys who haven't made it through an entire season. There's him. You have these 2 young guards and Steph Castle, Dylan Harper. There's redundancies on their roster. I think a lot of people are overestimating the challenges they're going to face on offense. So I'm with you.
Well, and I actually think that this is not a Wemby knock. I think Wemby's going to put up MVP level numbers, but his desire to play like early career Kristaps Porzingis drives me crazy. 13 threes is too many when you're 7'5". You shoot 70% in the lane. Just the shot diet just needs to shift a little. So that's
I agree with the take about a shot diet, but I think that it's the Spurs' fault because he has been their best floor spacer, basically. And so you needed that outside volume from him. And to get him into the lane, I think now that you have De'Aaron Fox, the question becomes, is there enough spacing around them? And so I think we will see more of Wemby getting easier paint touches. So I agree, they need to happen. True. I just don't think the Spurs have been built to drum those up yet.
So it's just, I think they're all in the mix with those guys. Like my scorching hot take is that the Mavericks are going to thump the Spurs on opening night, and it's going to be like, the Mavericks are back. Nico was right. Blah blah blah, and it's just going to be very, very silly. Great discourse fodder.
So, if they make the playoffs, is there like a team that you find to be like a particularly fascinating or even concerning matchup for them? I would say non-Oklahoma City Thunder division.
Concerning is the Clippers. The Clippers beat the Mavericks twice last season towards the end of the year so badly. It was one of those home and home ones in LA, and it was such a brutal beatdown where I'm sitting here going, why does the play-in exist? This is not, these are 2 completely different teams. So it's like that's sort of the team that I think they could absolutely like just get walloped by. A team that would be sort of fun, and this is not just because of the trade implications. Like I think the Mavericks and Lakers would be a hilariously fun kind of like playoff adjacent matchup. Not just for the storylines, but because of the play styles. The Mavericks have a bunch of players that Luka would play really well with because he has. And the Lakers have a bunch of guys who really, really look like the 2021 Dallas Mavericks. Like it's very weird how those 2 teams are built. So it's like the styles make fights matchup could be a lot of fun.
I would be fascinated to see them play the Rockets, where it's like, are both of these teams the smallest player on the court at some point will be 6'7", 6'8", and they have Kevin Durant now, so I guess their offense shouldn't be as ugly, but like these are 2 teams that could really ugly it up on offense and be like try to drive it down your throats and get to the basket rather than operate from the perimeter.
Watching Amen Thompson guard various players from this Mavericks team and then vice versa is going to be a lot of fun. Like that's where it feels very Spurs Pistons in those kind of where it's like really good teams that just boom, and that's what I would see from with not a lot of shot making. So it's that's
a movable object meets a movable object.
Basically. Yes, very much. That's the descriptor I would go with.
Kirk, this was great as always. Thank you for giving me so much of your time, like you do every year. Are you just able to tell our listeners, watchers, viewers, subscribers, whatever, where they can find you and all the great work that you do?
Mavs Moneyballs, where I run website over there. Got a lot of different people that contribute, from sort of all sorts of different Mavericks adjacent point of views. They just switched over our back end to a different look, so our website looks a lot different, which is fun. If you want to listen to me on podcasts, there's YouTube and anywhere where you can get your podcast, look up Pod Maverick. We record an awful lot during the season, so it's like if there's a particularly good
shows,
game,
you guys are behemoths with the post-game shows. I love
if there's a particular game that you found worth it, my co-host and I are diving into it, and so that's kind of my main recommendations.
Thank you once again, Kirk, and as you know by now, rest assured I'll be pestering you again down the line.